Let us understand how to perform row-level transformations using orders dataset. Here are the details about orders. Data is in text file format. Each line in the file contains one record. Each record contains 4 attributes which are separated by comma, and these are the attributes: order ID, order date, order customer ID, order status. You can review by running these things. This is the location on my Linux or Mac. If you are using Windows, you will not be able to use this approach to get the information. You might have to open the file using the text editor and you should be able to preview. However, if you are using Mac or Linux based approach to set up your notebook environment, or if you are using our environment, you should be able to run commands like this and you should be able to preview the file metadata as well as data within the file. You can see that each line is nothing but a record, and each record have 4 attributes, and each attribute is separated by comma. Now let me actually create this path variable which is of type string, pass it to open so that we can actually create a file type object by name orders_file. We have seen quite a few times in the past, and hence I am going a bit fast here. If you are not sure, just go back and watch the earlier content so that you are able to understand this. However, this is not very complicated. Even if there are gaps with respect to file IO, you can move further and you can actually focus on the manipulating of collections using loops in the pursuit of performing row-level transformations. Now, using this text.io wrapper object, we should be able to invoke read, which will read the contents of the file into a string by name orders_raw. You can check the type of it. It is of type string. As orders_raw is of type string, it has a function called as split lines. It will take care of splitting the string using new line character or character written as delimiter, and it will actually convert a big string into list of strings. And that is what is happening here. Now orders is of type list. Each element in the list is of type string. You can check the type of orders. It is of type list. You can actually check the first 10 records of orders by saying orders of :10. You can also get the type of one of the elements by saying type of orders of 0. It is of type string. You can also say len of orders to get the number of elements in this list. You can see that the number of elements in the list is nothing but 68,083. To ensure that all the data which is in our file is copied into this list of strings, you can actually run a command called as wc-l, which is nothing but a shell command on top of the location from which we are trying to read this data. It is nothing but this one. You should be able to see the same number of lines in the file. You can see there are 68,883 lines in this file, which validate that all the data which is in file is read into the list called as orders. Now, using this list, let us perform few tasks to ensure that we know how to manipulate the collections in the pursuit of row-level transformations. So in this case, the first task is to get all order IDs and associated statuses. Each record in the output should be comma separated string. So each element is like this. From this, we want to extract the order ID, which is nothing but first element, and order status, which is nothing but fourth element. And the final output has to be like this. And we have to apply this on each and every element. Now, to validate, we can create one string object by name order. It contains the string. You can actually use a function called as join. Join is available on top of string. Let's see why it is complaining. It is saying invalid syntax, I think because we have the comment here. Let me delete this and then let me run this. Even this one it is not liking. Let me see why it is not liking. Let me run this. Yeah, I think after question mark we shouldn't be having anything because I have a space and comments earlier, it failed. But now we are able to get the help. Typically for join, we use the delimiter first. We invoke join on delimiter and then we say .join and we pass the collection to it. Then it will actually use this delimiter to concatenate all the strings with that delimiter. So for example, in this case, if I say comma like this and then say .join and pass a list to it, by now you should be familiar with the list. Let's say you have 1, 2, 3, 4 as elements in the list. You can run this. Because these are of type integers, it is failing. If they are of type strings, it should work. We need to pass all these elements as strings only. So we can use the delimiter on collection of strings to concatenate all the strings with comma as the delimiter. Now I can run this and you can see all the elements in this list are concatenated with comma in between. If you want to use colon instead of comma, you can specify a column like this and you should be able to concatenate all the strings with this delimiter in between. Now once we extract the ID and status, we want to concatenate those things using comma. That's where this join function is relevant for our problem statement of get all order IDs and associated statuses. Each record in the output should be comma separated string. So we need to have order ID and status comma separated for each and every element from which we have extracted this information. So that being said, if we take our order, at this time we are only processing one order, we can actually extract the first element and the last element like this. So we said order, which is of type string, dot split of comma of 0. It will give us the order ID. So if I run this, it will give us the order ID. If I run this, it will give us the order date. Now to use join, we have to convert these two into a collection. So how to convert these two into a collection or list? It's pretty straightforward. You just have to use square brackets like this. Then you can copy these things like this. Now these two elements have become list and it have 1 comma closed like this. And then we can invoke join and pass this list with comma as the delimiter, and it will give us 1 comma closed like this. Now we have to apply this function for each and every record as part of the loop. If you want to manipulate the collections using loops and take care of row level transformations such as extracting some of the fields such as ID and status in this case, first we have to create an empty collection like this. So order statuses will be empty to begin with, while processing orders which contain all those 68,083 records for each and every order. So order will be one order at a time as it iterate through orders. Using that order, we are splitting using comma and extracting the ID as well as status, converting into a list, and then using join function on top of comma to concatenate these two things. And then we are appending these ID and statuses to this empty list, which is nothing but order statuses. So on top of list, there is a function called as append, and you should be able to append new elements to it. For example, in this case, let's say you have a list called as L. You might have started with one value such as this. Now, if you wanted to add new elements to this list, one of the way is using the append function that is available on top of list, which we have seen earlier. Now, let's say I want to append 2 into this list. Now, L contains 1 as well as 2. You should be able to validate that. So using this approach, we are actually appending each element which contain ID and status to order statuses which is initialized here. And finally, by the time everything is iterated, order statuses will have all IDs and corresponding statuses. Now you should be able to run this. It will have 68,083 ID as well as status comma separated. You can preview the data by saying order statuses of column 10 like this. You can see each element contain only ID as well as status. You can also get the length like this. You should be able to see the results. Either you can use for loop like this. Also, Python support a unique way of developing the for loops for creating the lists. You just have to use this logic as part of the square brackets like this. Here we are having the logic of processing individual records. So for order in orders, using this order, we are trying to process by getting whatever information we are looking for, such as ID as well as status. And then we are using join using comma as delimiter. So instead of breaking into 2 lines, we have written in 1 line and we have enclosed in the square brackets. Using this approach, we don't need to initialize order statuses. We can directly say order statuses equal to have the logic which you need to apply on each and every record, and then have the for loop. Make sure that whatever is defined here is used as part of the logic. So you are trying to process these orders one at a time using this logic. Okay, so this is an alternative approach which will work perfectly fine, and this also gives the same results. You can run this. You should be able to preview first 10 records using order statuses of column 10 like this, and also you can get the length of it, which is nothing but 68,883. So this is how you should be able to get subset of the columns from your original dataset as part of the row level transformations. One of the row level transformation is nothing but projecting of some of the columns from the existing columns. And we have seen how to take care of the projection using conventional loop. Now let us perform another task to understand how to take care of row level transformations using conventional loops. In this case, we are trying to get order IDs, the dates on which order is placed, and order status. Each record in the output should be dict with following column names as keys. Earlier we have seen how to convert a string into another string with only ID and status. Now we are trying to get ID, date as well as status, but in the form of a dict. So for this, I have developed a function called as getOrderDetails. It takes one argument, which is typically a string which represents the order. From there, we actually used the split and splitted the order into the actual values in the order, which are nothing but ID, date, customer ID, and status. Now we want to return the dict. The dict should contain ID, date, and status as the keys. You can see here, that's what we are trying to do. Dict is typically represented using curly braces, and each element is nothing but a key value pair, and those key value pairs are separated by colon in between. So the example for the dict is nothing but this one we have seen earlier. I just wanted to reiterate what or how the dict will look like. So it will be typically like this: order ID, colon 1, and then order date, colon 2020, 12, 22, and then order status complete. So this is an example for dict. So that is what we are trying to do here. We are using the values which are in the form of list and converting into a dict with the hard-coded keys ID, date, and status. As ID is of type integer, I am actually typecasting the ID to integer while building this dict using int constructor. So order values of 0 will be order ID. So if you look at this record, this will be the order values of 0, and I am using int constructor to typecast it to integer. And then we also want to get the date. That's why we are actually reading the date using order values of 1. Also, we are reading status using order values of 3. Now this dict will contain the 3 attributes which we are looking for. We can validate this getOrderDetails function using one order, and you can see that the string is passed and the dict is returned with ID, date, as well as status. Now we have to use this function on top of our original data set, which is nothing but orders. And this is how it will look like. So we have created a list by name order_details. We have initialized to empty list, and then while iterating orders, we are processing order by passing it to getOrderDetails, which will return the dict, and we are appending to order details. At the end, we will have the list of dicts. We should be able to run this, and then we should be able to preview the output by saying order details of colon 10. You can see the 10 entries here, or 10 dicts here, from 1 to 10, and you should be able to see ID, date, as well as status. You can also get length of order details using len function, and you can see this order details have 68,883 records. So each and every string is converted to a dict with ID, date, and status. You can also use this alternative approach without initializing order details with empty list. You can directly use square brackets and pass the functionality like this: getOrderDetails of order for order in orders. So this order is passed for getOrderDetails function in each and every iteration, which will return the dict, and order details is built as a list automatically. You can use this one-liner and you should be able to get your functionality done. You can also validate by saying order details of 10. You can see we got the 10 dicts with ID, date, and status. You can also validate by running len of order details. The reason why I'm running these commands or code snippets such as order details of colon 10 and len of order details is to ensure that the functions or the code are working as expected. It is very important for us to validate whenever we take care of certain logic using a programming language. Whether it is Python or Java, it doesn't matter. You always need to have a validation plan so that your code is validated from your side. It is also known as unit testing. As we understood how to take care of row-level transformations using conventional loops, now let's get into the other aspects with respect to manipulating collections using loops.